It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, this is the first time that it's you and I with this new format. What are we thinking of the layout?
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah,
good.
shout out to my boy Joe Frick for putting this together for us. I was like, he sent it to me. I wanted him to work on this. I think I told you off camera that I wanted to kind of get something going on here because I felt like there was so much just like space in the background. Really had nothing going on. So I sent Joe a text, didn't know when he was going to get it back to me. He happened to get it back to me on an episode where it was Derek and I was like, oh, well, this is kind of a weird way to bring it in, but shout out to DB for being on that episode and being the pilot episode of this format. But yeah, I think it looks sick. So shout out to Joe. Here you go. The OG form of Steelers Afternoon Drive back on this Monday. Alan, I got to be honest with you. I am the embodiment right now of Misery Monday. I even heard you use that term on Morning Rush today, so I appreciated that. But I just 4 hours of sleep after that game in the rain, had to work all day. There was also, unrelated to the Steelers or football, there's a connected payments issue, which directly affects us over the weekend, this massive outage. We had over 400 customers that were affected by this and called us today that I had to talk to. So this has not been a good Monday for your boy, but I'm here. What do we want to talk about?
Let's talk about how miserable you were yesterday during the game.
Great.
I mean, the Misery Monday really actually started yesterday at 8 p.m., right? I mean, it didn't seem like it. I was inside just looking out as the sheets of rain were falling down through Acrisure Stadium. And I was like, I'm just sitting there. I'm like, man, thank God I ain't out there. Smitty's out there. Dang.
I was out there. So like they tell everybody that there's going to be a weather delay. I was in my seat. They tell everybody there's going to be a weather delay. But at that point, there was like a 5-minute period where they said, like, they put up on the screen, you didn't have to go
first.
seek shelter. Yeah. So, but then they had like an usher coming down to tell us to go seek shelter. So like we went into the concourse, we're standing there for a bit, stuff like that, having conversation. Actually had like an hour-long conversation with this dude about tattoos. But anyway, then I don't know, the vibes were off for me just from the jump from this thing. I was like, I don't know why. I don't think that this is going to be a good night for the Steelers just based off this. Go back into the stadium. Game kicks off, and from the very jump, I just didn't like the way that things were going. Held the Cowboys to a field goal on that first drive. Again, offense slow out of the gates. It's been a recurring theme. I was kind of hopeful that's why this last week to me was not a Misery Monday, because I was hopeful that based off the second half offense, the way that they looked, that would carry over into this week. That didn't happen. They didn't get off to a faster start. They were still obviously conservative and I get it. I fully agree with your post and everything like that. When you have the offense that you do at your disposal, it makes sense to try to play offense the way that they do. They really don't have an alternative to do so. But either way, just vibes off. Didn't look great from any point in time. They obviously were able to get the turnovers. The third down defense was atrocious for a second straight week, which we can talk about that as well. But the entire time, even though the vibes were off, when you get down to the last play, Landon Roberts forces that fumble, and I'm like, wait, they're going to find their way to Steelers this thing and win this game, even though they have no business winning it. And I felt like they just find a way to do this at home. Gets to fourth down, and the Cowboys score a touchdown. And it wasn't a good night for your boy in any aspect. The hour and a half weather delay, getting 4 hours of sleep, the calls that I had to take today, just not a good day / morning / afternoon.
Yeah. I just took.
And then I heard the music for this show.
I can't relate. I'm doing great. I was up early this morning, got the morning rush out of the way. Been working on a big column here that I'm hoping to publish shortly after this. And where do you want to start here?
Actually, hold on. I want to say one thing. I said the vibes were off for the better part of this game. When Pat scored a touchdown with under 6, 5.5 maybe left in the game, something like that, I thought from that point on that they were going to win that football game. Just because it had just come out. There was that article in the Players Tribune this past week, if Pat scored a touchdown, who's going to hand the ball to the ref in honor of his grandfather. He used to write him letters, before every single game. That was who took him to and from practice. He would sit there and watch practices and stuff like that. That was his guy. And when he scored that touchdown and had that moment, I was like, okay, this is a sign that they're going to win this game. And then again, you did the Landon Roberts play. You did it the 4th down. I thought they were going to make just enough plays where they would sneak out a win, and then we could be sitting here talking about how ugly of a win it was and all the things that they need to do and why this isn't sustainable and all these things. But, instead, they sit here a 3-2 football team, which based off how they've played, honestly, they probably should be, as opposed to a 4-1 football team.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think let's just start there. I think this is like over the course of the season, if you sort of add the totality of these 5 games together, I think this is a 3-2 team. Like I feel like they have the record that they deserve. Would you agree with that?
Yep. That's why I said, like, if they were 4-1, I'd be sitting here like, they don't feel like a 4-1 football team. But at 3-2, I think they much more suit that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are a lot of problems with this team. I talked this morning about a lot of them on offense. I think I think a part of this is sort of for the fan base, some reality setting in also. Like, everybody has hope at the beginning of the season that it's going to be different or better. And usually that hope is irrational. Like, things don't change that much in one off season. Generally. I mean, sometimes they do, but generally not. Justin Fields has been in the NFL a long time. It's not really that surprising to me that this is what the Steelers are getting out of Justin Fields. In fact, I think this is probably like an upper level outcome in terms of what they could get out of Justin Fields. It doesn't really surprise me that this offense is struggling. If you had especially told me that they were going to play, 5 games without their starting quarterback, without half of their offensive line, without 2 of their top 3 running backs, and now 3 of their top 4 edge rushers, I probably wouldn't even have told you they'd be 3-2. This is not a great team, but it is kind of what it is. And I don't know. I see a lot of negativity out there that I'm not sure. I think is mostly just about that. Mostly just about, like, the false hope is gone, and now you're staring at what this team really is instead of what you hoped it might become. Because I think if you're looking at it objectively, this should be about where you expected them to be.
Yeah, no, as you were saying that there, I was like, yeah, I mean, I can definitely get on board with that because they're where I expected them to be preseason, but I can't lie. Like, you go through 3 games, and especially because of the way that they looked in that Chargers game, I would say, largely on both sides of the ball in that one. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a little bit more optimism at that point that maybe they would overachieve from where I was at preseason. So I kind of fell into that a little bit. So, maybe I needed to be brought back down to earth a little bit over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I think a lot of fans probably fall into that too. I think a lot of the fan base kind of just goes with the weeks, though. Like, if they go out against Vegas and, below, not even just winning the game obviously would do a lot for the fan base too, probably, and make them go back up. But like, if they were to have, score 27 plus points even or something like that, I think that you would see a lot of people jump back on the bandwagon and probably go too high. I just think that, like, a large portion of the fan base is like that, where it is on a weekly basis, they change how they feel about the overall picture of this team.
Yeah, and that's probably not smart, right? I mean, it's not the way to go about it. But I think, like, I don't know, I just see a lot of people talking about, like, oh, it's the same offense and it's the same problems, and it's not. I mean, some of it's similar, but it's, like, it's a different the problems are new. Some of them are the same, but they're generally in new lights anyway. Like, I don't get the Steelers are in a similar place to where they've been, in that I expect this team to be about 9-8, which I was talking about in all summer. But, like, what happened this week is different than what's happened before.
Yeah. So, okay, let's kind of dive into some of that then, because this question that we got is pretty interesting, and it's a good way to try to. You're mentioning like the way that fans feel like, okay, blame needs to be placed here, blame needs to be placed here, blame needs to be placed here. Like every time that we have a loss like this, I feel like a majority of the fan base falls back to Tomlin. I mean, I get it. That's the guy at the top there. But Max here, and this is greetings from Germany, Max. We appreciate you, Max. We love the support that we get outside of the US for sure. Is it hey, question for you guys. Is it an Arthur Smith problem? Is it a scheme problem? Is it Justin? Whole offense effort? Don't know what's going on here. A lot of in quotes missed in front of every other word when you describe this offense right now. Is this all related to each other? How would you divvy up blame when it comes to the offensive performances?
So I think there's like two questions here, sort of turduckened together, right? Like
yeah.
The first question is, okay, so we've seen the Steelers be a little bit better than they were last night. Why weren't they a little bit better than they were, right? And there's like 100 things we can point to and talk about, and I think it's all of those things, right? It's, you know, like George Pickens just loafing and
we got to talk about him
being in his own head. It's 3 or 4 really impactful drops over the course of a game that has not really been, even though we've talked a lot about the talent receiver, that specifically has not been a big problem. It was, a couple of really big mistakes from some guys on defense, Beanie Bishop, a couple backbreakers. And so like you can point to a lot of things about why a team is like slightly not as good as it was before. I think the overarching question is like, why is this team not out of the situation that they've been in, which is a team sort of stuck in the middle class of the NFL, where they don't really look like they're a real contender to win the Super Bowl. They're probably good enough to win on any given Sunday, but not a team you feel like is a threat to go anywhere. Do you agree with that? That's there's sort of like two implied questions there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so for me, the answer to the first question is there's a lot. And yeah, like Arthur Smith deserves some of the blame for that. Mike Tomlin deserves some of the blame for that. The question is just about the offense, but the defense deserves some of the blame for that too. How many punts were there? Like there weren't a lot of short fields, right? They weren't, and so when they did get turnovers, it was because it was a long drive and they were turning the ball over at the 2-yard line. Like, great that you got the turnover, but the defense didn't really set up the offense in a significant way very often. I hated the first quarter 3rd and 8 call. Actually, don't necessarily hate the run on 3rd and 8, but then why kick a field goal on 4th and 2 if you were going to run on 3rd and 8? Those two things don't go together. If you're going to run on 3rd and 8, go for it on 4th and 2 from there, and then I'm totally on board with the run on 3rd and 8. There was a lot of things that went wrong, but the big picture is they don't have a quarterback, and like I think that's clear that Justin Fields has not magically transformed into a player that is. They're getting the most out of him than anybody has, but he is not some kind of franchise quarterback. Like, he is not the same guy, but of the same ilk as what they've had. He's a little bit better, I think, than Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and those guys were last year. He's certainly a little bit better than he was in Chicago before, but he is not getting them to the next level of quarterback play. And I talked a lot about that this morning, but I really think that is the big thing. Like, I mean, yeah, Arthur Smith can have some success without good quarterback play. He's done it in the past. But I think this offensive line is still a project and still beat up. Najee Harris not playing that well. The other running backs are hurt. The running game concerns me, but I don't think that I'm going to look at the failure of the running game and really point any fingers other than like just it's bad luck. Like, I don't know what else to say there. I think they can still be better than they've been, but they're probably going to need to get a little healthier before I think you're going to see a big return there. In terms of like a lot of blame going at Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith, I don't really know what for. Like, just in general, I agree with you. Like, team loses games, people get mad at the coaching, but like, I don't understand what about this game really like shouted to people as like, oh my gosh, this coaching staff. Like, I don't know. I'm not really tracking that line of thinking.
I want to briefly talk about the Fields thing because I agree. Like, I've never viewed him as somebody that I felt like was going to take over and be the franchise quarterback here. But I also think it's incredibly tough because I view him that way, not necessarily like the guy that elevates talent. I think he can be part of a successful offense. But when you look at the pieces that are surrounding him, not really in a place to have to do that either. Like, they need, in my opinion, somebody, if they were going to be the type of offense that people are looking for, not necessarily one that the Steelers could win with, because we know that on the other side, if you did the defense that's you're expecting from the other side, you wouldn't need this type of offense. But when people are expecting a massive leap to come from the offense, like, where was that going to come from? Like, it would have had to have been Justin being much better than we anticipated, because the wide receiver room certainly wasn't built for that. The offensive line, probably even pre-injury, I wouldn't have said was going to be that type of level where they're game changing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't had some hope for the offensive line before the injuries, but now be happy if they could just keep it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, somebody said, how many different offensive line combinations are we going to see the rest of the season? I was like, well, hopefully this is the last one, because if they suffer another one, I don't know what they're doing. Like, especially until you get Dylan Cook back for one of the tackles, I wouldn't feel great. Spencer Anderson, okay. Like, I mean, there's guys behind them, but hopefully this is the last combination that we see. For sure. But anyways, the entire point of that was, I don't necessarily view Justin as a guy that I thought was going to take over this franchise for a decade or anything like that. I think he could be a quarterback that they could move forward with in the right system. I don't know that the other pieces are in place right now to get the most out of it anyway.
Yeah, certainly not with the offensive line the way it is. Certainly not with the receiver room. I really thought this was the game where the lack of talent at the wide receiver position really stood out the most. And certainly, that goes along with George just playing with his head up his ass. There's not really any other way to say it. Like, they have a lot riding on him, and he is not living up to that right now.
And this is back-to-back weeks. I don't know that it was as much at the surface of conversation after the Indianapolis game, but there were certainly plays going back on tape watching where you were like, man, where's the effort? Why is he 75, even 50% on this route? What's he doing? Even like somebody pointed out some like tells that he's given at the line of scrimmage, like with his mouthpiece in or his mouthpiece out, potentially like giving a tell to the defense of what he's doing.
Somebody caught on to that. I wasn't gonna say anything. Because that's one of those things where so we're not allowed to talk about the things we see at practice, and that's kind of a gray area, because I sure can't see it from the press box, obviously. And so I don't want to get in trouble, but that's been a thing for a long time where mouthpiece isn't in, he's not getting the ball.
Well, there you go. Yeah, somebody it's been caught on to now. Obviously, the effort and the blocking we've talked about, but
it's been a thing.
And I just think it's more so coming to the surface after this game when you lose, especially in the way they did the plays that got clipped up today that were going around on social media, where very clearly he's not giving it his all. Then he has the thing at the end of the game with Jordan Lewis. I feel like a lot of this is coming to the surface. It's funny because now I feel like an idiot. A few weeks ago, somebody asked us about like George's maturation, and I was like, we haven't heard much about him yet, so maybe he is going in the right direction. Well, at that point, they hadn't, really had any adversity to go through. We know we see what George is like when he's getting the ball and when the team is winning. He's going to have adversity, whether it's in Pittsburgh or somewhere else. And we've seen how he also handles the adversity side of things, and it's not been good.
I don't think you can win with players like George Pickens. I just don't. You can win with them, but you can't win because of them. I think that's a better way to say it. You can't go into your season saying the entirety of our passing offense is going to be down to the performance of number 14. Like, you just can't, because he is not a reliable enough individual to handle that weight, and he's proving that. I have heard some fairly negative things from some people in the organization this week leading up to this game. I kind of pushed him aside. When Diana Rossini had him listed as a trade candidate, I said, no, they wouldn't do that. I didn't think they'd bench him either. I think George Pickens is pouting his way out of Pittsburgh right now. I think the Steelers came into the season wanting him to prove that the problems in the receiver room were Davante Johnson, not him, that he could be a more mature version of himself, that he could grow as a player, and really become a number one wide receiver. And if he did that, they were going to give him a gigantic contract this offseason. And I think that is just running straight out the door. At this point, I think I do question whether he even finishes the rookie contract. I don't even know if he'll be here by the end of next season. I just it's becoming untenable. I know his teammates are sick of it. I've been hearing it from people inside the organization that are sick of it. I know they've tried a number of different things. They fined him over $200,000 last year. They hired Zach Azzani basically with the sole purpose of just trying to be a hard ass to see if he could get George in line. That didn't seem to work. Do you remember last year it was even like weeks after the blocking controversy, Mike Tomlin went out of his way to deeply criticize George in an interview on the Steelers website. Him being benched should surprise no one. I cannot believe that Mike Tomlin expects anyone to take what he said at face value last night. I actually kind of respect it in a way because I was ready, man. I had the question and the follow-ups ready for Bear. I generally do not go talk to Tomlin post-game.
Yeah.
He doesn't say much. I feel like it's usually a waste of my time. I went in there, I was like, somebody's got to do this, and I want it to be me. It's like the third question. Had 3 rockets ready to fire, and he comes up with that. And I got to be honest, he outcoached me. I was like, what are you talking about? I couldn't even come up with a follow-up question. Then Brooke Pryor bailed me out with a good one. Not that he answered that one truthfully either. Like the idea that George Pickens needs to have his snaps monitored like 35-year-old defensive tackle Cam Hayward is one of the most mind-bogglingly absurd things I've ever heard a head coach attempt to earnestly say in my life. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. I don't know what the path forward is here. Like you, I mean, I've never felt like George was going to get that second contract. I said I got to see it to believe it. Even when it came out like that was already ready to be done, I was like, that's not going to happen. There's going to be things that happen along the way that prevent that from happening because of George himself. I guess the question now is, was this another miscalculation with Omar Khan in the wide receiver room, or can you not place blame on him for not knowing that this would go down this way? Because the entire idea, there's a second part of this I want to add before you answer. The other part of this was the idea of not wanting to have Deontay and George together anymore, right? Did they make the wrong decision? Should it have been Deontay staying and George going out?
No, I don't think they made the wrong decision. I just think that this exacerbates the failure to replace Deontay Johnson. Like, I'll say this. I think trading Deontay Johnson was a mistake. And I think this makes trading Deontay Johnson more of a mistake, right? Like, because clearly it didn't fix anything with George Pickens, and they would have Deontay Johnson. Now, should they have traded George instead? I don't know. Maybe. Like, I think that's a hard criticism to levy, but they clearly should not have gone into the season with their entire hopes and dreams of having a passing offense on the entirely unstable shoulders of George Pickens. Like that was a bad idea, and it was completely predictable that we would end up here because that's who he is.
Yeah. So I guess that then goes into the Davante Adams thing, like everybody expected, and the idea was to pair the two together. But is it because, George is going to be on his way out? Are they going to build the passing game around Davante Adams? Like, I think that's a question now on people's minds because of, again, this kind of all coming to the forefront after this performance and those clips going viral and just more and more information in terms of how much, trouble George has been causing this team. How do you kind of see that? Like, do you still feel like the idea in the Davante Adams hunt is to pair the two together, or do you think Pickens could be on his way out if they land Davante Adams?
Well, I think it's certainly, like, I heard over the weekend that the Steelers want to talk to the Raiders about the future years on his contract. They want to be able to negotiate ahead of time. Okay. And to me, it makes the idea of Davante Adams being more than just a rental and someone they want here for 2 or 3 years a lot more real. I mean, we said, I think we were both in lockstep on this, that if they gave that money to Brandon Ayuk, they were not going to give it to George Pickens as well.
Right.
Davante Adams, I wasn't sure because he could have just been a rental, right? But now I'm kind of feeling the same thing where if they land him, I think they're going to want to keep him for this year and 2 years more. Certainly not at that salary, and not extend George Pickens. I also think they're going to try to find anybody that they can get their hands on at this point. Hopkins, Slayton, whoever they can find. It certainly makes – you can't bench George Pickens with the rest of the wide receiver room you have right now. You got to give themselves options. I remember Jeff Capel, who was at the game last night, by the way, Pitt basketball coach. His first year, he had like 3 freshmen who were really good, and the rest of the team stunk. And the freshmen were acting up at the end of the year, and he didn't feel like he could bench them. Right, because like the whole, they needed them, and I gotta say that you can't do that. You have to, if you have somebody who needs to be benched, you got to be able to bench them. And I think they have to find a way to give themselves some more options at wide receiver.
Yeah, the other part of that though, it just kind of occurred to me, like the Broncos are winning right now. The Giants just beat the Seahawks. Like, I'm not saying that's going to continue to happen, but we're like waiting for teams to fall out of the race to be able to trade receivers. And it's, you look at those wide receivers that we've talked about, and those teams really haven't done that yet. I heard something about DeAndre Hopkins within the last couple of days. Somebody texted me that they are hot on the Titans trail for DeAndre Hopkins. So I wonder if that is maybe where they pivot to if Davante Adams does go to the Jets or Saints. Is that all of a sudden the wide receiver they get it more aggressive for?
Yeah, I know that they're on the bye this week, but when they come back, Steelers fans better be rooting against the Titans. I think that's one of the more likely ones. The other one, I guess, is whether or not Kendrick Bourne can get healthy before the trade deadline. Because they did take him off the PUP list, but I don't think he played, did he?
Not that I saw. I don't know if he.
So if he can get in a game or two and look okay, that opens up another option. The Patriots, one of the few, like the 2 1-4 teams in the AFC are the Browns and the Bengals. We know they ain't trading with him, even though Amari Cooper and T. Higgins would be.
Oh, Kendrick Bourne did play.
What's that? Oh, he did? Okay.
Kendrick Bourne did get a helmet. Yeah, one catch for 6 yards yesterday.
All right. Well, if he can get going, that could be an option. Maybe someone like Christian Kirk, although he makes a ton of money.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have to look into the salary cap there. Adam Thielen's still hurt, right? So like that.
Yeah.
I don't think Carolina's going to have anybody to trade. And the Rams, the reason they're bad is that all their receivers are hurt. So it's tough. There's not a lot of teams that are out of it right now. You need a couple more to fall down before I think that like NFL trades are hard. I think that's another thing that like a lot of people are talking about, like, oh, why didn't they didn't get Ayuk? I'm like, you can want a player as bad as you can want them. And NFL trades are just awkward, man. Like they create salary cap problems. Teams have different desires, and the capital doesn't line up. It's real. Like you can do everything you can to land a player in a trade in the NFL as a GM, and you're probably going to bat like 200 on getting those done. Like that is just they're not easy to pull off. That's why there aren't very many of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a couple more topics on here, Alan, but you know what? We're almost at 30 minutes. I think we should save them for tomorrow because we can tease them.
We'll circle
and then people will have to come back.
We could just corporatize all the language here.
So To
Per
give you
my
guys a little
last
bit of a
email.
tease. To give you guys a little bit of a tease, what I do want to talk about, for sure we'll bring it up tomorrow along with whatever Tomlin has to say on Tomlin Tuesday, right? That's still the same, even though they played on a Sunday night, right? Like that doesn't change.
Yeah. The only time that changes is if they play.
Like they play Monday night in a couple weeks. Does he still do Tomlin Tuesday and Tuesday?
Yeah, no, he'll still do that then.
Okay.
The only time that changes is for Thursday night game. He does it on Monday.
Monday. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so we'll talk about whatever comes out of Tom on Tuesday, but I want to talk about the defense because over the last couple of weeks, there's certainly been question marks and things to talk about on that side of the football as well. And then really interesting matchup as we start to dive into this Raiders thing because both teams, there's some conversation about who's going to be starting at quarterback. So that's going to be fun to dive into as well. But until then, Alan, tell the people they can find you.
At @ASaunders_PGH, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. Like and subscribe to YouTube channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Got all kinds of more content coming.
There we go. Hit us in the comments with your thoughts on anything that we talked about today, where you think the conversation could go tomorrow. Also, if you have any questions that you would like answered on a future episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive, which is the same place you can find us on all the audio platforms. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. You will find us there. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe once you do find us, and find us on TikTok as well, Steelers Afternoon Drive. And then you can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.